Okay. So, as you've heard, in March. I went for a week in Turkey, and then a week in Greece, touring. It's supposed to be mainly the 7 churches. We ended up going to several other places as well. And today I've made a presentation of those 7 churches. Starting off, first night we landed in Istanbul. This was right outside the hotel. This is what they would consider a new mosque on this side right here. It's about 600 years old. In Turkey and Greece, what they say is if it's 500 or 600 years or newer, it's considered modern. If it's 1,000 years to 500, it's somewhat ancient. If it's older than 1,000, then it's actually ancient. And so it's a lot of their stuff that they consider old, we would consider ancient. This is the same photo, exact same location, just in the morning, when you can see it a little bit better. You can see that just how old it looks right now. And it's actually one of their newer mosques as well. So then, first in the morning, we went to this. This was the Hippodrome in Istanbul. This right here is an obelisk moved from Alexandria, Egypt, if I remember right, as a dedication when this Hippodrome was first established. They've now just turned it into kind of a city marketplace park, It's kind of a mini Central Park was how it was described there. Those obelisks, you can't really tell. They're about 70 feet tall, solid stone. This right here is the Blue Mosque, which we actually got to tour. And I have photos from the inside of that. Here's a better look at the obelisk. Neat thing about this, these rocks right here are original. They are there because this area is prone for earthquakes. Those keep it from falling over during earthquakes, which we often think that they didn't know how to do stuff like that, but that's proof they did. Also keep in mind, this, you can see, this is the original stonework. This is underneath the obelisk right here. On this side, this is from the Delphi, from the Temple of Apollo. And about 20 feet down is the original layer. And so you can't really walk on the original streets, but you're walking where the original streets were. Both of these were sent as donations for the dedication of the Hippodrome, which was created for the emperor at that time. I think it was Tiberius. And so both of those would have been in the Bible. Then starting off, as mentioned, we are going to enter the Blue Mosque, here's a more centered photo of the side of it. It's very elaborate, very beautiful, and as I said, it was considered very old for us. This one is, I think, 12th or 13th century. They would just say it's old. We would consider it ancient because we don't have a history going back that far. Sure. If it works. There it goes. Now going inside, this is right inside. This is the dome. That is all painted tiles and almost like adobe as well. And that's a dome that goes up. It's a very steep dome. On this side, that is hand-cut stonework. It's about 1.5 feet deep. That one was about 17 feet tall, roughly. Very elaborate, very dedicated to their work when creating these. These were not only religious centers, but also to show how powerful their sultan was. Which, later you'll see some others that I'll point out. They have these spires that will show, the more spires, the wealthier the emperor or sultan was, and the more holy the site would be considered. Inside, all the mosques have these 7 domes, and each are in layers. Each are more elaborate than the other. You can see like this layer is still that layer. That layer would have been the top layer, and then there would have been these middle layers. The reason this is called the Blue Mosque, I don't have the best photo of it. I couldn't really capture one because of the distance from that tourists are allowed to see versus Muslims. But all around these walls, you can see a little bit right in here and on this side right here. There's these blue tiles, and that's how it's got its name, the Blue Mosque. All the tile work around, especially the second story, is an expensive blue tile that was extremely popular in olden times. And it still retains its color extremely well. Not much of this has been renovated, but some of it is. It currently has running electricity. All these lights are fully electric now. And now we move on to the Hagia Sophia. This is one that was built by Constantine, who was the first quote-unquote Christian emperor of Rome, just before Rome split. This is just inside the entrance. Some of this has been refurbished and modernized a little bit, but they keep everything as close to the original as possible. And as you can see, this one is very detailed, very, very elaborate. And then here you'll see, again, starting with the domes. Right here you'll see the seraphim that are painted in, and I have in a few slides, we'll get a better look at those. This is just how big the Hagia Sophia is, which Hagia Sophia means Church of Wisdom. And so this was one of the first churches. It later was converted into a mosque, now it's kind of a mosque museum hybrid. But you can see just how large the Hagia Sophia is. We would walk here, and then some areas over here, not completely. We were only allowed on the second floor, so we could view down here where only the Muslims were allowed to walk. But we could see mostly on one side, but a little bit of a wraparound, just how it's laid out and all too. Which this and another section that would be on this side over here are tilted at an angle. I think it was an 11-degree angle, because the building is pointed straight east-west. Well, Muslims, they pray to Jerusalem, and so they angled it exactly the right degree to point exactly to Jerusalem while they're praying. So here's a better look at the seraphim. When the Muslims come in, like on this one, they put a gold plate over the faces because they believe that it's sacrilegious to have shown faces in any religious building or anything dedicated to their God. Whereas lately, in the last, I think they said 20 years, they've gone through and uncovered a few of them, and that's what the faces would have looked like. So here's a better look at the other side of where it's angled at 11 degrees. This is where they would do some of the reading, and then this is their main prayer area right here. Again, it's pointed 11 degrees, so it's slightly off skew, which really triggered some of the people on the strip with OCD, but they couldn't do anything about that. Another part of the Hagia Sophia is this mural, which shows Jesus in the middle, which is always depicted with the cross around the halo around him. That would be Saint Mary, as they would say, and John the Baptist. This mural used to be complete. Over the years, people have, over wear and tear and just touching it, would wear it down. They have a photo in the bottom corner that shows what it would have looked like, but it would be too expensive and too much work right now to go back and put it all back, especially since so many of the tiles and all are missing. This would have also been hand-painted for most of it. Otherwise, each individual tile, which were about half an inch wide, would have been hand imported, hand cut, and put on this. So after this, we went to the cistern beneath Istanbul. This cistern was made during it was a siege of Istanbul during one of the Crusades. And this was so they would have water for the city. They had water of about 3 months worth for the entire city. That includes bathing, drinking, livestock, all of it. This is just the entrance. And you can see we're going down about in the middle, and you can see just how long that is. This is a better image of just how big it is. All of these columns right here are reused, which is why you'll see this style of column versus this style with the Corinthian type pillars, column heads on top. This was a rush job. They did this entire room in about 2 years. Which, another thing they did is this. This is Medusa's head. Both of these are Medusa. There was a temple dedicated to Apollo which had some statues of Medusa. great, excellent quality marble. Well, they needed the marble to come build this. So what they did was they took the heads, these big, about 2-ton stones, brought them down here, and they went, well, we can't have a Medusa head standing straight up. We don't want anyone to think we are encouraging paganism. And so what they did to deface the statue, because they didn't have time to just chop it off, was they placed it upside down or on its side, because that is the equivalent of defacing it for them. So that's why the Medusas are upside down and sideways. And the base of these columns, which you can still see, it does still hold some water. It still is a little bit of drainage from the city streets, which are about 70 to 80 feet above where we are walking in this photo. Next, we went to the Archaeological Museum of Istanbul, which I will say has some amazing finds, including what a sarcophagus believed to belong to Alexander the Great. They're not sure if it did or not. But one thing I wanted to point out was the laurel wreaths. In this, they had traditional Roman laurel wreaths, which would have been given to victors of games, of like in the hippodrome, of the chariot games held there, gladiatorial fights, just war victories, anything like that. It's a symbol of victory. These are those. You can see, especially that one in the middle, it's a lot bigger than just the thin leaves we often depict. Each of these would have probably weighed 5 to 6 pounds, is what at least they're estimating. So a lot heavier, a lot bigger than what we often think of, which is also helps us depict in Revelation when he says we'll get our own laurels. This is more of what was being discussed, and just not a thin bead of leaves. So then, next few days we travel. It'll be south to southern Turkey to what's in the modern-day Izmir. And first we stopped at Smyrna, which is the agora or marketplace of Smyrna. So this is the original streets that they have uncovered of the agora, which is, again, the marketplace where they would store their goods, sell their goods, do trades, and often hire, where you would go, it's kind of where to find a job as well. This is us walking underneath one of the rows, kind of like this, in the rain, because we naturally chose a very rainy day to go to an outdoor place. But this place was massive. Nice central courtyard, lots of fountains, built-in irrigation down the center of the road to help with drainage, and also just to help. And it was covered, so there was no bumps in the road. You could just easily walk all over. These are some of the writings and depictions that were found in this agora. I'm not going to take the time to translate. This is a dedication to a very important Roman official of this agora. These are mostly decorative. On some of these pillars, there are some writings of typically either transactions, like really large transactions, transport documentations, or ceremonial dedications like this one. So that afternoon we went to Sardis, which is one of the 7 churches mentioned in Revelations 2 and 3. This is original mosaic flooring from, they believe, about 1st century, mid-1st century to 2nd century. And it's still this well-colored. Most of the coloration in some of these places is actually original and that well depicted. Which, like you can see, just how well the color still is remaining of what is remaining. These are not painted. These are actual cut tiles. All of these would have been cut by hand and placed in hand, and these would have been highly expensive floors. Both those floors and this were actually in a 1st century synagogue that we got to walk through. This would have been an altar where they would have done some of the readings, some of the smaller sacrifices and such at this time, which you will also see the eagles, they believe possibly were either a little bit of a pagan Jew hybrid, or those marbles were taken from a pagan temple to put here. This would have been where their council would have met, their elders, so to speak. they would have sat on these marble stairs. All of this has been recreated, but this is where they would have sat. You can actually go and sit on this today. We all did. We at least think we were supposed to. But solid marble. It would have been much more extravagant than we see now. But just try to imagine all of this right here, all the walls just layered in marble. Sometimes the sheets of marble would have been about a 1/4 inch thin, but it's just layered in marble, layered in extravagant stone. This was a very important religious center for the people in Sardis. Right next to it is this building, which is sadly not, most of it is not original, but they have enough of the original and exact buildings of other places to recreate it as well as they have. This is a gymnasium, which at the time I took this photo, I did not realize I would have been standing inside of the gymnasium at this photo. This gymnasium is about a football field and a half, roughly, if I remember correctly, long, and then another 50 yards at least wide. Really big building, and you'll see these are all extravagant Corinthian style of pillars. This would have been 1 to 2 floors depending on where you're at in this. They would have exercised, swam, lifted weights, studied, several other activities. This was a big social gathering point. You'll see that this is the pool for the church there. Right there is a stray dog. Turkey has a big policy on strays where the government actually pays to feed them and vaccinate them. And so they're actually really well taken care of. Just a neat little fact about Turkey. But it's, as you can see, in the back there was a little drain port for the pool. They actually found out that they have really intricate plumbing throughout the entire cities, where they would have been able to cycle water. Even the rich people would have even been able to have some water pressure and running water through their villas, which we saw in Ephesus. This is a temple of Artemis, though. It's one of the largest temples that we got to visit, which you can't really see in this photo. This is as we're walking up to it. Those pillars, I would say, are about 30 to 40 feet tall of marble. Here's a look from the side. You can see that guy right there is about 6 foot, 6'3". And so you can just see how massive these columns are. And again, these are all solid marble. You can kind of see how there's cuts in them every so often right here. Those were because they would smash them together and then lean them up, and they were not one solid piece of marble. Instead, they're many segments just smashed together, held together by friction and molten lead. Here's a better look at just how big those columns are, and then how thick the walls to this would have been. Right here would have been a pathway. Right here was the walls. So again, very thick walls, very sturdy place. Oddly enough, it was actually an earthquake that knocked that place down, mostly. So next, we're going to look at Philadelphia. There's not much to look at here. The site for Philadelphia could probably fit in this auditorium. They haven't uncovered much. The reason being, most of the ruins that they believe it to be existing are underneath the modern city, and so it would be several $billion for them to go in and move the city to uncover this. So really, there's only a few arches, beginning a few arches like this. If I remember right, they do not really know for sure what this is. They believe it may have been part of a synagogue, either that or a gymnasium or some other large structure, either that or possibly even an aqueduct. Again, they're not really sure. Around here, they also found a lot of coffins or sarcophagi, which this one was very ornate. These goat heads, vines, all throughout it. Again, this one was not marble. It was a expensive limestone-esque stone. I don't remember their name for it. But again, it's mainly these columns with some of these very well decorated marble pieces. A lot of it's just rubble that they're trying to piece together. It's they like to say it's the world's hardest jigsaw puzzle. So next, we're going to go to Hierapolis. which is not one of the 7 churches like Philadelphia and Sardis, I think Smyrna. This is just another city we got a tour. It's mentioned in the Bible. Extremely good view. As you can see, this is the original highway that ran through town. This over here on both sides would have been an agora or a marketplace for them. You can see these would have been homes all throughout here. That would have been another temple. And over here is something very fascinating, which I have photos of, which we'll get to in just a second. But first, here. When I mentioned earlier, the rich people had some water pressure if they were rich enough. That's what this is. Right here, free-flowing water. Here, 4 holes and 4 holes. Those would have been creating water pressure for the city. And if you didn't pay your monthly water bill, they would put a stopper in that and you wouldn't have water. Apparently the Romans also had to pay water bills. This is ancient backgammon. Very common. We saw it all over the place, especially in ancient Grecian cities. Very common marketplace break time, especially around in the back of shops. You'll see this. It's just kind of the thing to go take a break, socialize, tell stories, get the latest news while playing the game. So inside that building I pointed out earlier is this. This flooring, which is extremely extravagant, is also, notice how it's layered on other floors. Here's another example of that. And then plumbing. This is inside of a church from, I think, the 4th century. We were walking over this. This is the Cinthronium, which is kind of where the elders would have sat. It's a seat of honor. Back a little further offset, behind the main podium, all that. Again, this is where a lot of the important people would have sat. This is a baptistry from this church. Built in the shape of the cross. You'll see, I think, one other of these. And then there's another place that they have the exact same building, a style, but they they had it roped off where we couldn't get a photo of it, sadly. This one, I don't remember how deep it was, but they would fill it up with water. You would come in one side, get baptized, and come out the other. They built it in the shape of the cross, obviously representing Jesus and the crucifixion, which was very common in the 1st century. Everywhere we went, especially with the building of a church, they made sure to have a baptistry. Either that or running water, a stream, river, within close walking distance, which also shows they knew the importance of baptism and all as well. This was just across the street from that. This would have been a very wealthy person's house. This is me hanging over a wall to get this photo. Those, if I remember, are original marble tiles. The black marble and white marble interlaced. You can still see the pattern of it. This would have been, they believe, a church, one of the prominent members of that church's house. We had a Devo in the same house, but later, a little further down the site, we saw this amphitheater. The Greeks like to build them on these hills with a natural view. That way they didn't spend, extra time and labor digging out this giant area. They just built it into naturally steep hillsides, which this, you can't really see how big it is in that photo. That is me standing at the bottom. Up here are are people at the top. And that's not quite all the way to the bottom either. The best part about this, we could stand here, and I could be talking without a microphone, normal voice. People at the top could hear me perfectly clear. It's just naturally acoustic, naturally carries your voice that far, that easily. As I said, a lot of these places were found in ruins, like this, and then they would pull the pieces together and as they figure out the jigsaw puzzle and recreate stuff like this. Again, that's right, there's the church. This would have been a agora over here, more of a formal agora. And then this. A big thing that you'll find in the first few centuries is cult emperor worship. This is one of those examples. This is an Roman emperor at his temple that he had built here. They would come here, make sacrifices, pagan worship, all of that. And yet you can see that is not the original, but that is a perfect replica of the original in its condition. So you can see just how well preserved this all is. Most of this building is original pieces as well. They only really recreate this if they can have 80% or more of the original pieces and design as well. So when you see stuff like this, keep that in mind. This 80% original, roughly. This is as they're uncovering more of the ancient city road, and this is a better view of how much of that temple is remaining. You can see back here is one of the walls for it. It comes around with that statue in the middle and a place of honor. This is more of the ruins. This would have been, they believe, a Colosseum for Sardis, with the modern city behind it on the hillside. Again, this is a more housing for it. There's the church over there, the Agora right here, Temple of Zeus and Artemis over here, and the main highway going right here. So now we're going to move on to Laodicea, another one of the 7 churches. This was one of the largest sites we saw. If I remember, it's the second largest, Ephesus being the largest. This is an original gate right here. This was walking into the city. That's one of my instructors, and that was our tour guide. This, where they are sitting, they're making an example of what that is. This is a place just outside the city to stop and rest, because most of the traffic would have been either on horseback, by cart, or walking. This was the equivalent of an ancient bus stop. So they're over there just talking on this porous rock. This is a tomb outside this. So they buried all their city right outside the dead, and they would call those the necropolises, or the city of the dead. This is one of those 2 elaborate tombs. There's 3 sarcophagi here. There's another one inside on both sides, and I think a middle one about right here. This would have been a family tomb of a pretty wealthy family, but not the wealthiest. The wealthiest would have had marble. Moving on, we saw these arches, which are massive arches. Those are doorways. Each of these would have been 30, 40, maybe 50 feet tall. That is most of the original stone. And all, you can see they are trying to prevent it from breaking some more, and also as well as renovating it. This would have been the main city entrance, at least what they believe to be. This was all my group. So the main highway leading into town, on this side would have been the bathrooms, kind of like a quick pit stop on your way into town. On this side would have been some agora, of the agora. You can see this side agora, this side a little bit of the pathway. Just to this side of the photo would have been the relief area. So going further down this road, more agora, more stonework. You can see how these shops would have been laid out. This is the second gate. So we're still just entering the city. So right here, you can see the original line of the agora. This line would have been the back of the shops. And right here would have been part of the wall of the gatehouse type area. And that was a lot of Hierapolis, some of Laodicea. Now to one of my favorite stops was Ephesus. It was by far the biggest. They only have about 30% of the city excavated, which you're going to see it's a massive already. They're estimating it to be about 30-ish square miles, if I understood correctly, in total. About 200 to 270,000 people at its highest point. So it was a metropolis of its time, which you'll see. This, I want to point out, this is not the theater in Ephesus that we read about in Acts 19. This is where the Senate would have met. This, about up to the first layer about here, would have fit in the auditorium, just the bottom stage area. Very big buildings. This is mostly original. But it's most of this. These are original roads that we got to walk on. This side would have both sides would have been agora and selling points. They have some of these that they know are Christians because they found crosses and such inside of the shops. Some were Jewish because they found Hanukkahs and other Jewish symbols inside of the shops. And so we can kind of see, pagans, Christians, and Jews all working in this cities together, which is more evidence. Next, this beautiful building. This massive structure is the library of Ephesus. It would have housed up to 8,000 or so scrolls, or 80,000, I don't remember which. We got to walk up and into a little bit. This is after we go in and we turned right, and then we got into more of the city, agora. But first, this is us walking back. So I took that photo back about here. So now we're walking up to it. Then after you turn right, this is the agora. We have reason to believe Paul would have been selling tents in this agora as well. Now this is the theater that is mentioned in Acts 13. As you can see, it is much bigger. It can seat somewhere between 25 to 50,000 people. Which also just shows you how big it is, how elaborate it is. We got to go inside of it and have a Devo in there, which I'm just up on the rim about this level right here of the first story, and you can already see how small everyone is looking right here. That is my group of about 40 people. So I was just exploring at this point. We were getting everyone in, our group set up. I was just getting vantage points. This is standing on the stage area of this. This would have actually gone up another 2 or 3 sections as well, at least. But you can see just how massive. Again, built to where I could stand there, I could talk normally, no microphone, nothing, and they could hear me up in the back. Our Devo, we were all sitting at the top level, about right here, of the first section, with the president of Bear Valley on the stage giving a Devo. None of us had problems hearing him at all. We all got photos standing there like this as well, because why not? So this is kind of backstage a little bit. This would have been one entrance. This would have been the hallway behind the stage, kind of where you would go get the actors or whoever who are about to come on, and also to get the musicians, because they would have had musicians in the orchestral section as well. So this is just kind of the hideaway. This was a church dedicated to St. Mary. It was the 4th or 5th century. This is just outside the city of Ephesus, about 2 miles down the road. It's one of their favorite finds. That is where the elders would have sat. As you can see, if you can see, there's a cross right there in marble. This is another example of the baptistry. I put these 2 photos on here because this one, you can't really see how deep it is. This one, that's a 6'4" guy. And he's up to about here, about mid-chest. So these are deep. Pergamum is up on a hill, very defensible position. Lots of this was just ruins, so there's not very many photos. This was part of a structure dedicated to the king of the area, if I remember right. This was a part of a temple to Apollo. And then there's, like I said, most of that one is just ruins. Thessaloniki is, as its modern name is. It's Thessalonica, where Paul wrote the letters to 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. This is the destination for those. This is another amphitheater, which you'll notice that this one does not have a back to it. The backs were a Roman addition most of the time. And then this ring right here of marble at the bottom, those stairs are neat right there. It would have been a blockade so that they could host, instead of plays or dramas or speeches, they would have also been able to hold gladiatorial fights in these arenas. Moving on, this is the Octagon Church. This is more mosaic floors inside of that church. It's layered. It's in the shape of an octagon. More mosaics of original mosaics. This is behind the church. This would have been storehouses for the church for some of its wealthy members, and also some of the trade that they had, like these amphora, which were large storage jars. Moving on to Corinth, because we're running out of time a little bit. This was one of the structures. It was a spring in Corinth, bringing up water that was drinkable for its residents. A lot of Corinth is still buried, as you can see. Me and a few, we went exploring and went up in some of that. As you can see, that is a temple. I think I have another photo of that one. It's a temple to Apollo. These are those 3 columns for that temple. And then that would be most of the trip we went on. From Thessaloniki on was in Greece. The rest was in Turkey. Most of my Grecian photos were actually in museums, and from Athens, which I did not have in here. I have photos of Mars Hill, the Parthenon, all that, which I can gladly show you guys after, but since kids are out of class, feel free to go get your kids. If there are any questions, we can feel free to ask them at any point. As I said, I have... for me, the most exciting part would have been Athens. I love Greek mythology. I love Greek history. So being able to walk up through the Parthenon dedicated to Athena. There's a temple to Athena and Hera up there, temple to Zeus, all that. Most of that's original. They're reconstructing a lot of it. And then also walking the Athenian agora and all as well. Completely beautiful. Blew my mind. And then second would be probably museums. Like I said, there were fantastic museums. Ones that we saw: Egyptian sculptures, Grecian sculptures, Roman sculptures, Persian, Byzantine, you name it, all that. And then also the sarcophagi, as I said, there was one that they believe may have belonged to Alexander the Great, who came and conquered a lot of the Grecian world and greatly expanded the Grecian Empire. The architecture? So a lot of the modern day churches don't use this material. We didn't really see any Church of Christ over there. There's one in Athens, but that some of us went to. I was not one of those. A lot of the older churches use some of the material, which is why they make it so difficult to reconstruct some of this, is because materials transported up to 30, 40 miles away, and they just don't know where it all goes. But most of the material, because it was such heavy and expensive material, was either, when it was broken, was either sold or just reused, like in the cistern. Any other questions? No? Yes, we did. Yes, there were lots of maps without the Americas, and also a lot of most of Africa was not on there as well. And then also a lot of like Russia up north. It was really a lot of the maps and landscapes we saw were only the Mesopotamian Empire. A few of them had a little bit of England, but not much. But it really showed how little they knew about how big the world was, and yet for them that was a massive world. Because traveling 30, 40 miles for us, takes an hour. For them, it would have taken about a week. Are there any other questions? Yes. Also, I have a lot of photos. In total, I took almost 3,000 photos. Yes. Or you can stay and ask me questions.